Well, good evening and welcome to CAF Warbird Tube for this evening. We are so pleased to have a returning guest. We have a stable of historians who we call on from time to time, and this is one of our favorites, Ross Sharp. And Ross, not only are you going to talk about the Spitfire, one of the most iconic aircraft of World War II, but you are up late at night. You are in England, and you got about a 6-hour time difference. So we appreciate the fact that you're staying up tonight to do the presentation and answer questions people might have.
Well, it's great. As you say, I'm a former resident of New England, so I'm
Yeah.
halfway across the Atlantic, basically.
So you're good. So this is episode 221, and we're going to talk about the rise of the Spitfire. And it's amazing when you dig into the history of the airplane. And you've got some slides that cover this, but the Spitfire actually comes out of a racing lineage and seaplane racing as well. It's
Yeah,
something
yeah,
that didn't happen a lot here in the States, but was very, very popular in Europe.
yeah, very much so. The Schneider Trophy, which you'll see later, was a French invention pre-World War One.
All right. Well, we'll get into that in just a couple of minutes, but we want to officially welcome you, especially if you're a first-time viewer. Love to have you here at Warbird Tube. Glad to have you along. And if you're a loyal Warbird Tube fan, we're thrilled to have you back with us tonight. Now, if you enjoy what you see tonight, just don't forget to spread the word on your favorite social media platform. We really do appreciate that. Now, Warbird Tube is made possible by the Commemorative Air Force. If you'd like to find out more about the CAF, our events, our aircraft, many of which that are out on tour right now, or how you can be a part of the fun, just visit our website, commemorativeairforce.org. And as I mentioned a moment ago, as you're watching, you might have some questions. Just type those in the chat box and we'll try to answer them either while we're in the presentation or we'll save some time at the end before we sign off. So with that, Reginald Mitchell and the rise of the Spitfire. Ross, welcome back.
Thank you so much, Steve. It's always a delight to be with you. So, Reginald Mitchell and the rise of the Spitfire, from the S-6B to the Mark V. We're only doing half the story tonight, otherwise we'd be here till next Thursday. Reginald Joseph Mitchell, CBE, FRAES. Mitchell joined the Supermarine Company in 1916. He was promoted to chief designer and company director in 1927. He worked on the highly successful series of Schneider Trophy races, giving him immense experience in high-speed flight. Unfortunately, he developed cancer in 1934. Sadly, the surgery he had under a top European specialist in Vienna, Austria, proved unsuccessful. Joseph Smith was appointed as chief draftsman and assistant to Mitchell at age 28. Mitchell used to have his driver take him down to the airfield on most days to watch the Spitfire prototype fly. Mitchell died on the 11th of June 1937 at just aged 42. Just as the production orders for the Spitfire began to flow. Following Mitchell's death, Smith became chief designer and developed the whole line of Supermarine fighters, right through to the Spiteful and Seafang, the ultimate development of the Spitfire line. The Rolls-Royce R engine. Quite simply, the R-type engine was far ahead of its time, a marvel of British skill and ability. That's a quote from Steve Holter from Leap into Legend. Rolls-Royce developed this 27-litre highly supercharged engine from their Rolls-Royce Buzzard power plant. Notice a pattern there. All the engines are named after birds of prey, which was used to power several RAF flying boats. In order to power the Supermarine S6 and S6B racers, designed by Mitchell to win the Schneider Trophy International Air Races. Work on the R-type helped to develop the world-famous Merlin and also influenced the Griffon of the same 37-litre engine displacement. I'm sorry, Steve, I
All right,
appear
I'll
to
have to
see...
click off the mute button. This
Yes.
design and technology was really so far ahead of anything else that had been developed at the time.
Yeah. To a great extent, the supercharging was an absolute wondrous thing to behold under the aegis of Stanley Hooker, later Sir Stanley Hooker, um, a man of immense talents. So yes, Rolls-Royce were on top of their game, to put it mildly.
They certainly were, and of course not just for the Spitfire, but eventually for the P-51 Mustang.
Oh yeah, that's a whole other story for part
It
two.
certainly is.
Right, the Snyder Trophy itself, as I mentioned earlier, it was a French uh, development that was first run in the French Riviera at Caen um, just before World War I broke out. And the Sopwith tabloid, a British design, won the first one. Now, the Supermarine S6B, as you can see here, they were specially built, and Supermarines were a special builder of float planes and flying boats. The international race for the Snyder Trophy, won twice by the US, by the way, involved many European countries. Some of the very best and fastest float planes came from the firm of Supermarine. The S6B of the Royal Air Force's high-speed flight was Mitchell's masterpiece, powered by the incredible Rolls-Royce R engine that we've just seen. On the 13th of September 1931, S6B Sierra 1595 flew around the offshore course mapped out over the Solent, uncontested, and took the Snyder Trophy for Britain permanently, because that made him a 3-time winner. A few days later, S6B Sierra 1596, shown here, flown by Flight Lieutenant George Stainforth of the Royal Air Force High-Speed Flight, broke the world airspeed record, attaining a top speed of 407.5 miles per hour. This is 1931,
Yeah.
Steve. It's unbelievable stuff.
Yeah. It's been less than 30 years, or approximately 30 years from when the Wright brothers first took flight. It's just
Yes, and not only
incredible
that, it
how. Yeah,
utterly smashed Hughes's land plane record, of
right.
360. Staggering stuff. A dismal affair. The Supermarine S224. British orders for military aircraft were very rare in the depression-shrouded early 1930s. So when the Air Ministry issued specification F7/30 for a new monoplane fighter, almost all major manufacturers scrambled to bid on it. As well as Supermarine, bids came from Hawker, Bristol, Blackburn, and Westland. Later, Gloucester added to the race by building the SS-37 as a private venture. Mitchell's design really was nothing to write home about. Plain, almost ugly, the design was constrained by the use of the officially preferred Rolls-Royce Goshawk evaporative cooled engine, one of that company's rare failures. Here's another look at the S224. Perhaps the use of such large trousered legs was made necessary by the need to house the condensing tanks and pumps of the evaporative cooling system, as well as 2 of the 4 303 Browning machine guns. 4 Browning machine guns. Sadly, the S224 was 25 miles per hour slower than the predicted performance figures, and the rate of climb was approximately 30% worse than that projected. The last straw would have come when someone worked out that a single rifle caliber bullet would have put the aircraft out of action if it had hit any of the pipes in the extensive cooling system. Clearly, Mitchell and Supermarines would have to think again.
The cooling system for the airplane. Can you
Yeah,
maybe just describe that a little bit?
yeah, certainly. So you go away from Prestone cooling and you
Okay.
use pure water, pure distilled water, right? Which you allow to boil, and thereby technically it's actually more efficient in that it absorbs even more heat energy by allowing it to boil rather than just raising the temperature of a mix of water and Presto. So what you have to do, you're now faced with lots and lots and lots of steam, and you've got to actually cool this down and reuse it inside the system. And if you look closely on that image of the 224, you'll see what appears to be very, very many thin lines on the wing and on the trousered leg, just like it was on the S6B, to actually condense the water and circulate it round. But all you have to do is fire one 30-06 bullet at this huge target, pierce one of the lines, and all your coolant goes out, and the aircraft's finished. So somebody didn't quite think that through. Right, the Supermarine S300, enter the Spitfire. Here we see the superb one-to-one replica of Mitchell's masterpiece, the S300, powered by a Rolls-Royce Merlin II of 990 horsepower. There were several changes to this design before it reached a production standard, but the general shape and sit of the aircraft make it instantly recognizable. The diorama of R.G. Mitchell at his desk and his last design are on show at the Tangmere Military Aircraft Museum on England's south coast. Tangmere was owned by the aviation section of the US Signal Corps during World War I, and the 92nd Aero Squadron were based there. They didn't see action, they were just a training unit at the time, before the RAF took it over post-war. It played a large part in the Battle of Britain and D-Day. So it really is a magnificent job that they've done. Anybody that's on the south coast of England, please go to Tangmere. You'll enjoy it. The Wingman, Beverly Shenstone. A gifted aerodynamicist, this Toronto native was able to study advanced wing design in Germany whilst working for the Junkers concern. Reginald Mitchell offered him a position at Supermarines at £500 a year, and that's those in the days when it was $4 to the pound, so that's $2,000 a year in about 1932, something like that, 33, after a 2-month trial. Shenstone developed a modified elliptical wing for the Supermarine S300. This made sure that the vortex flow was not concentrated at the wingtip and therefore reduced the drag across the whole wing. The result was a stronger structure, but one that was more difficult to manufacture accurately, as my late mother-in-law found out when riveting Spitfire wings under contract at the Midland Railway Works in Derby during the war. Joseph Smith, no, not that Joseph Smith, this Joseph Smith, Mitchell's chosen successor. Joseph Smith had been chief draftsman under Mitchell at Supermarine and was a highly talented and respected individual in the aircraft industry. Following Mitchell's death, Smith was appointed to lead the Spitfire design team. He insisted that Supermarine should extract the maximum performance from the Spitfire before they started work on another fighter design. Indeed, their first post-war jet, the Attacker naval fighter, used the wing from the Spiteful, the last development of the Spitfire line. The 1930s Shadow Factory and Expansion Scheme. Welcome to the Ford Merlin. Yes, we'll get to that. By the 1930s, the British government realised that the UK's aviation industries were inadequate for the perilous times. More aircraft and aero engines were needed. By mixing automotive and aero industry expertise, it's called shadowing by the aero industry, and expanding existing sites, more aircraft and engines could be built. For example, here is the last Ford UK built Merlin engine from their Trafford Park, Manchester factory, close by a former Ford Model T plant, which had been standing empty. It was finished by apprentices and is still on its assembly stand. Yes, despite Henry Ford refusing to build Merlins and the contract going to Packard, Ford UK said, oh yes, we'll build them. And believe it or not, they built something like 2/3 as many as Packard did. Everybody
Really?
knows Packard Merlins.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody knows Fords, and yet they were great engines. Squadron leader H.I. Cousins, 19 Squadron, leading a formation of Spitfire Mark I fighters from Duxford. 19 Squadron at RAF Duxford were the world's first unit equipped with the Spitfire. Fitted with a two-bladed fixed-pitch propeller, this limited the potential performance of the aircraft. Observe that some of the Spits are carrying the squadron's number on the tail fin. This is immediately before the application of RAF identity codes pre-war. Also note the application of oversize overwing RAF roundels, with the outer yellow segment reaching both the leading and trailing edges of the wing. At this time, some of the Mark I aircraft have the original straight top fuselage, such as the two Spitfires behind Squadron Leader Cousins, and similar to the one on the prototype, whilst others have the new domed canopy, as the Squadron Leaders have there. That made life much easier if you were anything over 6 feet.
Yes, they were very, very compact cockpits, especially for, as you mentioned, anyone over 6 feet.
Anyone over 6 feet, yeah. Believe it or not, here we are. A pre-war practice scramble, 19 Squadron, RAF Duxford. Points of interest: the presence of a pilot in a pre-war white flying suit, though not very white at this stage. Pilots running to their machines carrying their parachutes. By the way, this was staged for the press. This was a photo opportunity, and there's a video available online. They are carrying their parachutes. During the Battle of Britain, these were usually laid out on the wing by the ground crew, so the pilots could run faster, basically. These Spitfires have no external bullet-resistant glass at the front canopy, or an internal one for that matter. Note the early half-black, half-white paint scheme under the wings. This was to identify the friendly fighters to anti-aircraft guns. No Spitfires went into battle with two-bladed Watts propellers. However, Hurricanes did in the Battle of France. Also note the absence of small squares of red doped linen over the gun ports. These came later and helped stop the guns from freezing at altitude. By the way, immediately behind the Spitfires, you can see two hangars. Don't look for the second one if you go to Duxford. Why? It was blown up for the Battle of Britain film. That was a genuine demolition job.
But the other one is still there?
Oh, you betcha.
Good.
Crisis at the Castle Bromwich Shadow Factory. Lord Nuffield versus Lord Beaverbrook. No, this isn't jousting. This is politics at its very worst. Lord Nuffield, an English auto magnate, rather like Henry Ford but with a title, and a strong supporter of the British fascist leader Oswald Mosley, had promised that he would build 1,000 Spitfires in his Castle Bromwich plant, a new facility built partially on farmland and partially on a former sewage works. By May 1940, on the edge of the Battle of Britain, not a single Spitfire had been built. A heated phone call between Nuffield and the new Minister of Aircraft Production, the Canadian Lord Beaverbrook, seen on the right, and caused the factory to be handed over to Vickers Limited. The plant's first 12 Spitfires were built from parts from a cancelled Turkish order that were shipped to the factory. Later, Max Aitken, the son of Lord Beaverbrook, became a leading fighter pilot with a DFC earned in the Battle of Britain. Flying Officer Roland Robert Stanford Tuck, 92 Squadron, Royal Air Force, over Dunkirk, May 1940. This superb painting by the late Robert Taylor depicts Flying Officer Robert Stanford Tuck in his Spitfire Mark 1A shooting down a Bf-110 over the beaches of Dunkirk. The RAF had sent Hurricanes to France during the Phoney War, and as the front in Belgium and France collapsed, the French pressed for Spitfires to be sent. Instead, Spitfire squadrons patrolled over France from nearby UK bases. Hugh Dowding, the head of Royal Air Force's Fighter Command, resisted all attempts to send more fighters to France. It is quite possible that the Battle of Britain, and at this stage the war itself, would have been lost had this been done. By the way, my own copy of Victory over Dunkirk hangs behind me. They are rare to get, but if you come across one, ladies and gentlemen, buy it. It's a classic. The Battle of Britain and the Blitz on Southampton and the Supermarine Factory. A series of heavy raids by the Luftwaffe in August and September 1940 at the height of the Battle of Britain sought to destroy the main works of Supermarine at Wollaston, Southampton. Damage was done to the plant and subcontractors, as well as the nearby airfield and flight sheds. This caused the Ministry of Aircraft Production to order the dispersal of Spitfire production. This was done just in time as the September the 24th raid destroyed the main works, as you can see. The Luftwaffe had an excellent aiming point, unfortunately. The seaplane and flying boat ramp that you can see sticking out into the water. This literally spelled doom. A personal note. My late mother-in-law was recruited to rivet Spitfire wings at the Midland Railway Works in Derby. Each pair of wings were then driven away. She knew not where. I was able to tell her that they were headed to the Shadow Factory at Castle Bromwich, which made her very happy. The first photo reconnaissance Spitfires and Sidney Cotton, the first air spy of World War II. Before World War II, Sidney Cotton, an Australian aviator and photographic specialist, had flown clandestine sorties in his pale green camera-equipped Lockheed 12A over German airfields. When World War II broke out, the now squadron leader Cotton, RAF, formed a photographic unit which undertook sorties with modified Spitfire PR Mark 1s over occupied Europe. These Spits were stripped of armament, armour, radio and radio mast, fitted with 2 cameras in the gun bays and with pale green-blue upper sides, also known as camo tint, something that Cotton invented, and sometimes white undersides. They were faster than the current Bf-109. They were given extra fuel tank behind the seat and more oil, but lacked the wing leading edge tanks of the later photo-reconnaissance Spitfires. A rara avis, the Mark II Spitfire Mark IIA brackets LR close brackets. The Spitfire was designed as an out-and-out interceptor, a fighter aircraft with the smallest airframe that could do the job, leading automatically to short range. As the war progressed, the RAF needed Spitfires with longer range, and a quick solution was to fit a 30-gallon fixed tank to the starboard wing. This non-jettisonable tank added another 30% fuel to the Spitfire, but also made a little more drag and the handling difficulties as the tank had no baffles. Also, a sharp downward spiral could be induced. Only 60 were built, and they were issued to numbers 66, 118, and 152 squadrons. Some were used on long-distance patrols over the Bay of Biscay, looking for U-boats and German blockade runners.
I cannot imagine the the difficulty that it would be to fly that with that fuel tank just on one wing and no baffles, as you said.
Yeah, but they obviously were very careful because the Merlin, if you can see from the propellers, has got a clockwise rotation. So the torque, the P factor on the airframe, will be pulling it to the right. And you've got the extra drag and the weight of the tank on the starboard wing to counteract that. But yes, no baffles. That was well, yes.
As they say, it was baffling.
Oh, well done, that man. Well done. Extra points. The Mark III, sire of many Spitfires. The Spitfire Mark III was intended to be the successor to the Castle Bromwich-built Mark II and the first upgrade of the fighter. The aircraft was powered by a Merlin RM2SM fueled with the new 100-octane petrol. This gave rise to cooling issues and much more. As such, despite the fact that the Mark III reached over 390 miles per hour at altitude when on test, the aircraft was used as a development machine for other Marks and never reached a frontline unit. Note the clipped wing, which made it resemble a BF-109 and made people think this wouldn't be a good idea, and full wing well doors, just like the prototype we saw earlier. One Mark III was even schemed with, and I find this difficult to believe, 4 303 machine guns and no less than 6 20mm cannon. Yes, I know.
That would add an amazing amount of weight, and not only that, but how would you find space for any of the cannon ammunition?
I don't know, but I think somebody was doodling one day on an ink pad, who knows. A temporary expedient, the Mark V. With the appearance of the BF-109F over the Channel, it was realized that the RAF Spitfire Mark II was now outclassed. Since the Mark III was unlikely to reach production status for some time, the Rolls-Royce Merlin 45 with a single-stage supercharger producing 1,515 horsepower at 11,500 feet was fitted to a Mark I or Mark II airframe to give the Mark V. This restored the balance against the Luftwaffe, with number 92 Squadron getting the first Mark V in February 1941. Here you can see the Shuttleworth Truss Mark V being stripped down. Note the sky, that's the name of the paint, coloured band around the rear fuselage. This was common to RAF Fighter Command and was sometimes used on unarmed aircraft to make possible enemies hesitate before they attacked. By the way, if you get a chance to go to the Shuttleworth Trust collection, please do. Battle in the desert. The Spitfire first arrived in the Western Desert in August 1942, in time to take part in the air battles over General Montgomery's successful advance. They acted as top cover for ground attacks by Hawker Hurricanes and Curtiss Kitty Hawks, as well as performing fighter bomber sorties of their own. This Mark 5C is finished in middle stone and dark earth over azure blue, typical Mediterranean colorings for the RAF. And it's in the markings of 249 Squadron, Royal Air Force. The Universal or C wing allowed it to carry up to 4 20mm cannon as shown here. Although this was not a common armament fit due to the increased weight, as you just mentioned, Steve. Please note that the aircraft does not have a Vokes tropical air filter fitted at the moment, mainly because they're incredibly difficult to get. Something that would not be allowed in the Western Desert or on dusty airfields in Malta and Italy. Very pretty aircraft. That's one of my shots, by the way. The Siege of Malta and the Club Run. In 1942, Malta was under siege from both German and Italian air forces and their navies, eager to stop attacks on the Africa Corps supply line from Italy. Originally, just 4 Sea Gladiator biplanes were available for its air defense, soon supplemented by Hurricanes, which began to be outclassed by the Bf-109s of the Luftwaffe. Sicily was just 90 miles away, and the situation was dire. The Royal Navy and the USS Wasp began ferrying Hurricanes and Spitfire 5Bs tropical on what was called the Club Run. Here we see the very first 15 Spitfires delivered to Malta on the deck of HMS Eagle during Operation Spotter on the 15th of March 1942, just 1 month before the Doolittle raid. They were flown off with Slipper under fuselage tanks and Vokes tropical air filters when close enough to Malta. Veterans described the air battles around Malta as being more intense than those during the Battle of Britain. Inspired by the past, the Spitfire 5 floatplane. The disastrous Allied Norway campaign of 1940, with its lack of suitable airfields, made Supermarine hark back to the S-6B. A Mark I Spitfire, Romeo 6772, was turned into a floatplane fighter by adding a set of Blackburn Rock floats. The collapse of the Norway campaign caused the project to be dropped, and that floatplane never flew and was converted back to its original fighter standard. However, the war in the Mediterranean caused 3 Mark V aircraft, Whiskey 3760, Echo Papa 751 and Echo Papa 754, to be converted by Folland Aircraft as island-hopping fighters. They were intended to be based on some of the many islands of the eastern Mediterranean, but that idea fell through, and they ended up being used off the Great Bitter Lake in Egypt. Maximum speed was 324 miles an hour at just over 15,000 feet. Operation Torch, the other end of the Med. Whilst Montgomery's 8th Army was chasing Rommel westwards, a major invasion by the Allies was taking place at the other end of the Mediterranean. Many aircraft types used by the Royal Air Force and Royal Navy's Fleet Air Arm wore United States Army Air Force markings for political reasons, as it was thought that the Vichy French authorities might not shoot at them. Sometimes they were shot at, sometimes they weren't. Units of the United States Army Air Corps, such as the 307th Fighter Squadron of the 12th Air Force seen here at La Sena, Algeria in 1942, operated their Spitfire 5B trop during the landings by the three task forces, Algeria and Morocco. Torch and the 8th Army's advance spelt the end of the Axis in North Africa. By the way, please note that this Spitfire has got shark mouth, very like the
P-40s.
ABG in Burma.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Going feet wet, a Spitfire for the Royal Navy, the Seafire. The Royal Navy had requested a navalised version of the Spitfire as early as 1938. Initially, this was rejected as the RAF needed as many Spitfires as it could get. Here is Bravo Lima 676, a Spitfire 5C, which was fitted with an A-frame arrestor hook and a strengthened fuselage. Powered by a Merlin 45 and named the Seafire 1B, it was taken on charge on 15th of June 1942 and was rapidly replaced by the 1C with the universal wing. There was even a recce version, the Seafire LR2C, and an upgraded Seafire Mark III. All of these early Royal Navy machines were based on the Spitfire Mark V and suffered from not having folding wings and an undercarriage not suited to deck landings, as you'll see in the next part of the story. A gathering of eagles. Sorry, I had to steal that. Many US volunteers decided to travel north and join the RCAF, or join the RAF directly as soon as World War II broke out. 3 Royal Air Force squadrons, number 71, number 121 and 133, were comprised of US volunteers. Initially, these were equipped with the Hawker Hurricane, but soon the Spitfire made an appearance. Here we see a Spitfire Mark 5B, coded Mike Delta uniform of number 133 Eagle Squadron. Note the starter trolley in the foreground and the rear fuselage of a 2-seat Miles Magister trainer behind MDU. Miles Magister trainers were issued to fighter squadrons as squadron hacks, basically. On the Eastern Front. During the fierce battles on the Eastern Front, many types of US and British aircraft took part in the action. The Spitfire was one of these. Here we see Spitfire Mark 5Bs lined up at Abadan, well, it was then Persia, it's now Iran, in 1943, being readied for delivery to the Russians. The Russians used Spits to escort Petlyakov PE-2 twin-engine bombers on raids, and also to mix it with the Bf-109 and Focke-Wulf 190 fighters in the area. Easier victories for the Soviet VVS 57th Guards Fighter Aviation Regiment, GAIP, and 821st Fighter Aviation Regiment, IAP, came against ground attack sorties by the Junkers Ju-87 and recce flights by the Focke-Wulf 189. Later Spitfire Mark 9s were also supplied to Russia, to be covered in Part 2. Battling the Japanese over Darwin, Australia. Number 457 Squadron Royal Australian Air Force had seen action over the UK in the early part of World War II, but the Prime Minister of Australia asked in 1942 for the unit and 2 other squadrons to be sent to the north of Australia to combat Japanese raids taking part on the port of Darwin. Here we see RAAF personnel with a tropicalized Spitfire 5C in February 1943. See the Vokes tropical filter under the nose. The 5C was heavier than the Zero but had a higher combat ceiling and dive speed. Therefore, most combats, if possible, were of a boom and zoom nature. The aircraft were ultimately finished in foliage green and midstone over azure blue. In July 1944, the 5C was replaced with the superior Mark 8, but that is outside the scope of our story. Spitfires in SEAC. Spitfires were the slowest of the standard RAF World War II fighters to reach Southeast Asia Command, aka CBI in US nomenclature. The first version to arrive in theatre was the Mark 5C, with the first example of this tropical version reaching India in 1943. A Battle of Britain veteran, Flight Lieutenant Bob Holland, DFC, was one of those to fly the 5B Tropical. The aircraft shown is Mike Alpha 654, Kilo Whiskey Romeo, named Sniffer, of number 615 Squadron, Royal Air Force. The aircraft of Flight Lieutenant Kevin Gannon, Royal Australian Air Force, obviously on secondment to 615, shown at Dohazi, India in December 1943. Number 4 Squadron, Indian Air Force, must also be mentioned as they flew 4 Mark 5C Spitfires. The 5C was quickly replaced by the definitive longer-ranged Mark 8. The Eternal Spitfire. It seems that almost every year another new Spitfire or Seafire appears on the scene somewhere in the world. Many have their genesis in wreckage scattered across Russian steppes or buried in French sand dunes. Each has a story to tell. A first edition copy of this magnificent work, which lists every single Spitfire and their evolution, called Spitfire the History, Morgan and Shacklady, Key Publishing, sits in my office, and I can heartily recommend it. Full disclosure. When I worked at Echo Golf November X-Ray at International Airport, I helped put together the sortie which gave rise to the cover shot. I bagged the P2 seat in the chase plane, of course. For added joy, the formation overflew the old Rolls-Royce main works in Nightingale, Derby, where I was born, and where an aunt spent the whole of World War II engraving data plates to be riveted onto Merlin engines. We really were bound up in this plane. Still serving. Thanks to the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight of the Royal Air Force at RAF Coningsby, some of the classic early versions of the Spitfire are still serving. A genuine Battle of Britain veteran, a Mark IIA, Papa 7350, built in 1940 at Castle Bromwich, and a Mark 5B Alpha Bravo 910, built in 1941, are still active with the flight. Long may they continue to inspire those who see them. A beautiful Spitfire Mark 1A. In the markings of 71 Eagle Squadron, this beautiful Spitfire Mark 1A flies as a tribute to those Americans who served in the ranks of the Royal Air Force in World War II. Seen here touching down after a display at the Imperial War Museum, Duxford. The easiest method of visually distinguishing a Mark II from a Mark I is to look for a very small bulge on the starboard engine cowling. That covers the Kaufman cartridge starter of the Mark II's Merlin engine. That's the easiest way to do it.
Is that little bump right there?
No, that's
no?
No, it's the other side, I should say.
Ah,
not okay. The starboard on the it's the port side.
Port side, okay.
The port starboard. No, I'm right. Yeah. Yes, starboard side. It's the one you can't see from here. Where you were actually circulating, you can just make out the crest of all the Eagle squadrons and Hurricanes and Spitfires. And some of those guys actually stayed on in the Royal Air Force rather than transferring across. It's a generational thing. Probably one of the most evocative of RAF displays took place at the Imperial War Museum, Duxford, the original home of No. 19 Squadron, the first Spitfire squadron in the world. Here you see the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight Spitfire 5B being chased, in inverted commas, by an RAF Typhoon GR4 from the same base. The GR4 actually has period RAF roundels like the Spitfire. I was very lucky to catch this display. They didn't do too many of them.
And you mentioned the roundels, and one of the very early shots, they were on the wings were much larger, as you said, covering from the leading edge to the trailing edge. When did that change over?
It started in the Battle of Britain, actually.
Okay.
We believe that the huge roundels were there because there wasn't a war on at the present time, and a lot of people didn't even know what this aircraft was. So they want to make sure that it was actually seen and it was friendly, right? When the shooting started, the roundels got smaller. Also, they omitted the yellow outer rim to the roundel because that made it stand out more against camouflage. So that was another good idea. And then they actually, certainly for night work, they omitted the white inner ring completely. So you just had a red and blue roundel. Okay. Just as you see in SEAC, you have a dark blue and a light blue roundel. Yeah, so roundels changed. There's several lovely books in my library behind on markings. Yeah, it's a whole new world out there.
You in a couple of the aircraft mentioned the Vokes tropical air filter.
Yes.
Can you expand a little more on what that was and what
Yeah,
it
you'll
what it
see
did?
it actually looks rather like my chin. It's got a bulge under here. I've obviously got a Vokes filter in there somewhere, folks.
There you go.
And the idea is that it used a Venturi effect to actually dump dust particles and sand, very abrasive, into the curved base of that filter, right, whilst allowing the air to flow through a filter, and it dumped things so it could be emptied out at the end of the sortie. But you needed that large empty space to allow the gravity and also the flow to do its work and drop the abrasive particles down. The Germans had a much more, I hate to say this, a much more efficient filter that looked rather like a long blunt cigar, and you'll see that on the port side of the ME-109s, right, just fitted in front of the normal air intake. Very efficient and a lot less drag than a Vokes filter.
You mentioned some of the different theaters where the Spitfires were deployed. I did not know about the Russian Spitfires.
Oh,
Do you have an
goodness,
idea of
yes.
how many aircraft went there?
Yeah, it certainly runs into the hundreds.
Really?
But they quickly swapped over from the Mark V to the Mark IX. The Russians actually did an in-house conversion to a two-seat version, not as a trainer, but as a very fast liaison and staff transport, getting a general around the air theatre. They did quite a few of those. They'd already done that to the Hurricane as well. They were, they liked the Spitfire, but they weren't too thrilled with the Browning 303 machine guns. I know that they converted several of squadrons of Hurricanes. They ripped all the armament out, and they fitted their own 20 millimeter Schwack cannon and their own 0.5 inch machine gun. A pair of those, one in each wing. They like to tinker. I don't blame them, really.
Well, now in our next episode, you're going to continue the story of the Spitfire. Can you give us maybe some highlights of what we'll see in the next one?
Yeah, I see, unfortunately, that this particular version that we've actually got has missed a couple or three slides I added. Of course, well done, Sharp. Should have made sure you got the updated one. Yes, we'll run through a couple of things. If we step back, I think two. Okay, Battle of Britain Memorial Flight. This started by chance. The Spitfire carried on a very long career post-war, in secondary roles in some cases, and one of those secondary roles was as a meteorological aircraft. And the PR Mark 19, the last of the reconnaissance Spitfires, was used at what they called the thumb flight, THUM, standing for temperature and humidity flight, at Wood Vale near Liverpool. And the idea was that every day they would take off, sometimes twice a day, and climb as quickly as possible to 30,000 feet, letting the instruments record the temperature and humidity as they went through the air column. And they had to do this as quickly as possible because the air was being blown, obviously, by the prevailing westerly winds in towards the island of Great Britain. And that way they're trying to sample the air as it went up as clinically as they could. And the Spitfire was ideal for this because the stripped down PR Mark 9 would climb at 3,000 to 4,000 feet a minute. Just insane. And a huge Griffin with a 5-bladed propeller. So they survived until I think about 1961 or 62, and the last three were actually turned into preservation. But one of them was donated to what was known as the historic flight at the very famous Battle of Britain airfield, Biggin Hill, on the outskirts of London. And pretty soon it was joined by a Hurricane and some more Spitfires, and pretty soon they renamed it the Memorial Flight and then the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight. And now it has Spitfires, 2 Hurricanes, one over there on the left, the only Lancaster in Europe and one of only 2 in the world in flying condition, and our very own Dakota Mark IV, you can see there in Arnhem markings. So yeah, it now has a whole range of aircraft. We suffered a tragedy in that Squadron Leader Day was killed in a takeoff accident, not this year, but the year before. A real tragedy. But other than that, it's a continuing joy to see these aircraft performing every year. I happen to be a member of the Lincolnshire Lancaster Association, which supports the Lancaster, and we have our own special LLA day at the base each year. We do have to buy our tickets, but it's like a one-off show just for the members. It's quite amazing. I didn't take that shot there. You haven't got it all there. They're all set. There are 7 aircraft of the flight in that original photograph. You can find that on my Alamy page. Plug. Right. And there we are now for something completely different. Amazingly, I've survived into my 70s. I think the police must have very slow cars. That's the only thing I can think of. And I've decided to become absolutely bold and set up a new enterprise. The website is not yet live. I've got this very highly talented young lady who knows more about IT than I will know in the next 3 lifetimes. And Joe is actually working on that. It should go live the next 2 or 3 days. But I managed to buy the domain, much to my amazement. Aviationhistory.uk was up for grabs. So that was quickly snapped up, and that's what the actual enterprise will be called. On the reverse, oh yes, the image on the left is the front of the card, and that shows the only flying Bristol fighter in Europe at the moment. It's at the beautiful all-grass airfield at Old Warden in Bedfordshire, where the Shuttleworth Trust had its home. And in front of it is a genuine World War I Model T Ford, as used by our armed forces on the Western Front. And that could be a shot you could have taken in 1918, apart from the fact it isn't.
Yeah.
But the Shuttleworth Trust is a magnificent place, and if you want to go and see the world's oldest flying aircraft, that's where you have to go. It's got a Blériot 11 from 1909, and it's even earlier than the one at Old Rhinebeck. It's quite an amazing piece of kit. The back of the card has a nice shot, as you can see, of Panchito, B-25J, that I love, and that was taken at the New York International Air Show when I was living in the States. And I chose that shot because I got a large, I didn't crop it, I left the large piece of sky beneath it so I could list all the things I'm willing to get involved in. And also put the my own Alamy link, which is alamy.com/portfolio/Ross Sharp, no spaces. And that'll get you to around about 400 images at the moment, about a third of which are aviation, and the rest are everything from, I don't know, dog breeds to Roman ruins, lichens, old boats, you name it, a whole range of photography.
Very
So
good.
yeah, that's what I'm doing in my ancient time. Oh, and I will be, just a warning for those of you on the East Coast, I will be coming over to New England. I fly out of Manchester on the 11th, courtesy of Aer Lingus, and I'll be speaking at an event which is being sponsored by the Coakley Foundation. It's on the ME262. I'm one of the 4 guest speakers. So I shall visit a few old friends and my grandson, not necessarily in that order.
Well, good. We wish you safe travels. But before you come over to the States, we have one more show to do, and that will be part 2 of The Rise of the Spitfire, and that will be our next episode next Wednesday night.
Yes, covering everything from the Greek Civil War, Israeli War of Independence, the Malayan Emergency, as it was called. The insurers wouldn't let it be called a war. And, of course, Korea. So, and post-war as well. So, yeah, lots and lots of things to look at.
Well, good. Well, and again, thank you, Ross. And for those of you who tuned in tonight, thank you for being a part of this as we learned a little more about the incredible Spitfire. We do appreciate you joining us. And if you'd like to hear we'd like to hear what you thought about the show or any other ideas you might have for future topics you'd like us to cover, just drop us a line at media@cafhq.org. And again, as I said at the top of the show, if you like what you see on Warbird 2, please share it across your social media platforms. And remember to subscribe on YouTube and make sure you click that bell icon to get notifications when our new episodes are posted. So until next time, I'm Steve Buss. Have yourself a great night.